When you think of Toyota's luxury division, Lexus, they literally built their reputation on offering vehicles that are plush, comfortable, and quiet luxury cruisers. And today we're actually taking a look at not a new Lexus, but a car that for me personally is probably the epitome of Lexus from the early 2000 eras. This right here is a 2004 Lexus ES330. And as you guys know, the ES is essentially a guzzied up version of the Toyota Camry, but this car back in the day offered a lot of luxury touches that were typically found in much more expensive luxury vehicles, but for a much lower price tag. So today we're actually taking a look at this 04 ES330 with around 260,000 miles. And the big question I want answered, for those of you who are looking for a comfortable commuter car, but you don't want to break the bank on something that's new or newer, how does this 2004 Lexus ES330 stack up? Stay tuned to find out. So before we get into the backstory of this car, I want to introduce Martin to the channel.
What's up?
This is actually his vehicle that he has let us borrow for the day so we could actually do a review, because a lot of you guys have been asking us to do reviews on used cars. And Martin, tell us a little bit about this car and why you bought it.
Well, my fiance needed a good commuter car. She drives a lot for work and wanted something comfortable and also very affordable and pretty decent on gas. And this was it. This fit all of those criteria. It's front-wheel drive, easy to maintain. I found this at a local dealer. I only paid $22.50 for it.
$22.50?
Yeah, $2,250, and it had 261,000 miles. But when I checked it out, I couldn't find anything mechanically wrong with it, just a few cosmetic scratches and things like that. But that didn't bother me. You know, it's a commuter car, very comfortable, and I drove it and I was kind of impressed. I was like, wow, this is a 20-year-old car with this mileage, maintained at a Lexus dealer, and I went for it, and it's been a perfect fit for the last month that we've had it.
Yeah, and honestly, you can't really find a better car for $2,200. Like, considering
really
this is a Lexus,
and not in this market, like a Lexus, you know, for that price, it was kind of a steal, and I had to jump on it.
So this is actually his new purchase, which replaced the old 2005 Vibe GT that we actually reviewed for you guys a few months ago. And Martin, I have to say, you picked up a really nice car.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it is pretty nice.
Yeah, so what this is a 2004 ES330. And if you guys are familiar with the ES, this is essentially a guzzied up Camry. In fact, Lexus essentially launched the brand, or Toyota launched the Lexus brand with this car and the LS back in 1989. It's kind of crazy to think that this car nameplate has been around for so long. So this generation is known as the 4th generation model, and Lexus essentially gave it a new engine back in 2004. So that's where it became the ES330. And I was telling Martin earlier that the 330 name was very short-lived in America because Lexus essentially only offered it for, I believe, just 2 model years on the ES before they replaced it with a bigger engine, a 3.5-liter V6, which we'll talk about that motor at another review. But I want to first talk about the styling of this car, because this vehicle here, I have to say, was introduced around the same time as the 5th generation Camry. Remember, the Camry and the ES were always kind of together in terms of their release back in 2002. And the front end of this car, I have to say as well, I actually think I may have preferred the look of the previous generation. It was more boxy. This is a little bit more bubbly to me, but you can see the headlights are unique to the Lexus. You have the signature, at the time, Lexus grille, which obviously doesn't have like the big Predator spindle face because that was still a few years away. There's some chrome accents here. This model here, though, Martin, it doesn't have the HID headlights, correct? These are halogens.
Yep, these are halogens. I believe this is more of a base equipped car.
Which still, it's a Lexus, and when you buy a Lexus, even though it's a base car, it still comes with a lot of stuff. So I'm imagining Martin will probably replace these headlights out. That Lexus actually gave this car a pretty big refresh in 2005 where they added a projector beam headlight. HIDs were still optional. You have fog lights down here, which I've seen people also put yellow fogs on their ES. Are you going to do that, Martin?
Maybe, we'll see.
I think it actually would look good, so I would probably just make that little change. This color is actually called Black Garnet Pearl, so it's actually considered a black, but obviously, as you can see, it's a deep burgundy purple. That was a very popular color back in the 90s, so again, this car kind of reeks of late 90s, early 2000 era design, which I actually think it's aged pretty well, although I will say that the ES for the generation after this was a lot more sleek. But let me go ahead and actually pop the hood and show you guys what's powering this thing, because again, this car came out at a time where the model names actually meant something. So ES330 stood for a 3.3 liter V6 engine, which Today, Lexus doesn't really do that anymore because of these new turbocharged engines. So Martin, you said you replaced that hood strut, correct?
Yep, that's one of the very few things I've done to this car so far. Because I don't drive it that much, it's mostly my fiance, it's her commuter car. So yeah, only that.
Well, hey, that's the first thing that usually goes bad on these Toyota Lexus cars is the hood strut will go bad, so it's nice that you did. But anyways, underneath this hood, you're gonna find an engine that is just ubiquitous with so many other Toyota and Lexus products. It's their 3.3 liter naturally aspirated double overhead cam V6 with VVTi, variable valve timing with intelligence. This motor replaced the old 3 liter V6, which they were part of the same family. It's known as the 3MZ FE. The 3 liter was like the 1MZ FE. This motor was replaced by the 2GR FE, their 3.5 liter V6 back in 06, 07. But back in the day, this motor made 225 horsepower and 240 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers were average for the class. I mean, if you guys remember back in the era, there was like the Honda Accord, which had a 3 liter V6 that made 240 horsepower. Nissan had their 3.5 liter V6 and the Altima that made 240 horsepower. And again, I'm talking about Nissan and Honda, but those brands also had their luxury divisions with Acura and Infiniti. It goes out through a 5-speed automatic transmission, and sadly, back in the day, you could not get all-wheel drive on this ES. I mean, today's ES, you can get all-wheel drive on a 4-cylinder engine car, which this model here with 225 horsepower, it honestly has good power. And the beauty about this engine is the sound. It's just a buttery smooth, like silky V6 that you barely can hear running, which we'll talk about later during the driving scene. Fuel economy back then was also 18.27. And the other great thing, Martin, you said this thing will actually run on regular gas, correct?
Correct, yeah. These can run on 87.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing is back then Lexus products required premium fuel. So because of its Camry roots, you could get away with putting regular, it has like an 18.5 gallon fuel tank. I think I was seeing like 350 miles of range, which honestly is pretty good. I mean, it's a lot better versus what your fiance was driving before, right, on your Sequoia.
Right, yeah, 13 miles per gallon.
Yeah, so this is roughly twice the MPG, so I'm sure you guys are probably appreciating that. What's interesting though is if you guys look at a new ES, an ES350, it has a V6 with bigger displacement, more power, and it's rated to get like 26 MPG combined versus 21. So technology obviously progresses forward. I imagine the next gen ES will only be hybrid, just like the new Camry. So again, these V6s are going away. Lexus never quoted a 0 to 60 time for these, but I think the magazines were saying 8.3 seconds, which honestly was fine. Was fine back in the day, and these things weigh in at around 3,500 pounds. Surprisingly, the new ES is only about 200 pounds heavier versus this model here, so Lexus did a pretty good job with keeping the weight in check, even for the newest generation. But let's go ahead and close up this hood, and let's take a look at the rest of the profile of this car, because I will say that I think that the new ES has gotten a lot more sleek, sportier, and youthful. This, to me, just kind of looks like the epitome of a Japanese Buick. Would you say so, Mark?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it as an insult or a compliment because that's what Lexus built their reputation on, is building these luxury cars that are librarian quiet, that are kind of boring to look and drive, but they're also so comfortable, and that's what people loved about these things. In terms of the size, this was a mid-size sedan at the time that was around 191 inches long. Its wheelbase is 107 inches long. Actually, the front and rear overhangs look enormous in this car. That's kind of what's interesting, is because the new ES has a wheelbase that's 5 inches longer, and it's 5 inches longer overall. And they've also made it lower, which again, gives it a more youthful look. But again, I think typical Lexus buyers probably prefer something a little bit more comfortable. And they're also gonna really like these wheels, which they look like 15s, but they're actually a 16-inch wheel, as you can see, wrapped in a 215 by 60 R16 tire. Lexus did update the wheels and offer a 17-inch wheel in 2005. So I imagine, Martin, if you are looking for a new set of wheels, you'll probably want to check those out as well, because I actually really like the way those wheels looked back in the day when Lexus first showed them off. You can see sunroof is on this model. There's a lot of chrome around this vehicle, which back in the day, Lexus and chrome was kind of very synonymous, although nowadays they're kind of blacking everything out with these F-Sport packages. And at the back, you can see Lexus obviously gave it its own unique look with the taillights, although the basic silhouette of this car, you can kind of look at it and see Toyota Camry in it, but that's, again, not necessarily a bad thing. They did upgrade the taillights in 2005, so let me know in the comment section below if you guys prefer these taillights or the ones after it. They should be kind of interchangeable based on, if you guys want to just buy out the taillights. You can see ES330 badge here, which again shows you that you have the bigger 3.3 liter V6 as opposed to the 3 liter. And then I'm surprised, Martin, there's a chrome exhaust tip. You didn't add that, right?
No, that came with the car. I'm not sure if that was a dealer option or something. Okay,
well, I think the Camry SE had a chrome exhaust tip, but hey, it's kind of nice because back in the day, a lot of these brands typically didn't have an exposed exhaust system. Now, in terms of the trunk, I actually don't think there's a release here.
No, there's not that I've found.
Wow, okay, so I was expecting Lexus to do a release, but that's okay. There's a little, we have the key fob here, so you can basically open up the trunk. And the other great thing about this car is the big trunk. It measured 14.5 cubic feet, which is actually around 0.5 cubic feet more versus the new ES. So again, the shape of this car, the bigger opening, allows it for more practicality. Even though it may not be as sexy, I think people are gonna appreciate the, you know, better practicality on something like this kind of design. So welcome to the interior of this 2004 Lexus ES330. And I have to say, this thing has aged surprisingly well, given the fact that it is 20 years old. It's crazy to think that a car that was built in '04 is 20 years old. It just makes me feel like I'm ancient. But regardless, getting inside this interior and shutting the door, it surprisingly still has a nice solid sounding thunk. I mean, Lexus back in the day was known for their quality. And it really is showing in this vehicle because, again, this was one of the top selling Lexus vehicles back in the day. Now, here's the key fob for the car. You guys remember Lexus used to do an in-remote key like this. Now they've kind of switched over to their intelligent access key. There's no Lexus logo on the back, which tells me this key is probably an aftermarket unit, right, Martin?
Yeah, it is.
Which is fine. It looks like the factory key. I mean, you could easily just buy a cover and get the Lexus key in there if you guys want. But again, stick the key in the ignition. I think in '07, when the new generation came out, the 6th generation came out, that's where Lexus introduced push button start. But back, you know, here you have a good old key here that you turn very satisfyingly, and then starting the vehicle up. Oh, that sound to me just reminds me of back in the days when I was in high school, because every Toyota Lexus vehicle essentially had that lovely starter noise. And I have to say, Martin, this car for 263,184 miles is incredibly well kept. The interior still looks and feels great. The materials in here also is still top notch. In fact, Lexus has always been known for their wood, and you can see there is a ton of wood all over this interior. There's wood on the dash, on the center console, on the door panels, on the steering wheel as well. You can see this wood steering wheel, I believe, is an extra $300 back in the day. And it just looks really nice. In fact, the new Lexus models, sadly, have been getting rid of the wood. So I'm just sad at the fact that the newer Lexus products don't have wood, because I think that wood trim really makes these interiors feel really luxurious. You can see the gauge cluster. It has the classic kind of Optitron illuminated instrument cluster with the classic 3 dials here with the tach, the speedo front and center, and then your fuel and temperature gauge, of course. The steering wheel, you can see, this is essentially like a similar steering wheel to what Lexus introduced, I believe, in the IS when the first generation IS first came out. The company actually put a new steering wheel on this car in 2005, where they added more steering wheel audio controls. This is, again, the older Lexus steering wheel, but I actually think I prefer the look of this more versus the '05. Have you seen the '05 steering wheel, Martin?
I have. I like this one better. It's simpler.
I agree with that. I just think it also looks sportier too. So again, that's always a personal preference taste. What's funny to me is this cruise control stock here. I just had a 2024 4Runner and it has the same cruise control stock in it. So this right here is classic 90s era Toyota and Lexus. The door panel materials have a nice soft touch injection molded plastic, more wood trim. All the windows are one touch up down from the controls, which is, again, all features you expect from Lexus. You have a 10-way power driver's seat on this car, along with 2-person memory. There's an 8-way power here on the passenger seat, which these seats are still incredibly plush. I mean, they essentially look like they were lifted out of, like, your living room because they're so cushy and soft. You could get cloth in this car back in the day, but I think Martin's car has the optional leather. In 2005, they also added a passenger memory for the passenger side. So a couple of other features they added. This is also a heated seat. They added a cooled seat in 2005. So again, keep that in mind if you guys are looking at this car to purchase. The '05 models had a few more extra features because of the refresh. Now, what Martin did upgrade, however, is the infotainment system. Martin, who makes this screen? And tell us a little bit about it. How big is that screen?
I think this is a 9-inch, and it's kind of the whole bezel. Everything comes as one, and it's plug and play. I'm not sure of the exact brand, but I bought it online, and it was very inexpensive, and it has wireless CarPlay.
Yeah, I mean, to see wireless CarPlay in a car that's from 20 years ago is definitely a cool thing, and it definitely looks big. I mean, if you guys remember, Lexus offered a navigation system with their Mark Levinson audio back in the day, which was probably like a 6-inch screen. So this screen looks massive in this dash, and I also like the bezel that it came with, although I think you mentioned you can tell it's a different bezel because this is dull and this is shiny. This is the original piece. This is the new piece that they gave you, but it's honestly really well integrated, and I think that it adds that modern touch to make this car, again, feel a lot more modern versus the fact that it's 20 years ago, because a lot of these older cars, they're aged from their interior when you look at the infotainment system. So you've clearly fixed that problem here. In terms of the dash materials, you can see there's a soft touch injection molded plastic here, more wood. And then like so many other Camrys of this era, you can see the dash is warping slightly there. But honestly, that's the only issue that I see with this interior. And remember, it has 263,000 miles. So it's just fantastic that the interior is held together very nicely. You have dual zone automatic temperature control here. You have an ashtray, it looks like, although you can kind of use it as a coin tray as well. You have that traditional gated shifter here for the 5-speed automatic, which as you can see, there is kind of a manual mode in here, although some competitors offered like an actual manual mode in the actual shift pattern or paddle shifters. Lexus didn't offer that, of course, on the ES. This is a very comfortable car. Your cup holders are here. They pop out very 90s style, and they probably don't hold very big drinks very well, I'm assuming.
No, from my experience, no.
Which is fine. I mean, back in the day, nobody really cared to have those huge big gulps or whatnot. You can see there's a nice padded console area here. Then if you open it up, it honestly has a pretty big storage compartment, and it also has 2 levels of storage. Obviously, no USB ports, but Martin did add 2 of them here. As you can see, you said you drilled into the center console here to add those?
Yep, I just drilled that out 1 inch and popped in this USB plug from Amazon, and it connects to the stereo, so you can plug in your phone to charge it, have CarPlay, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it looks really well integrated too. So for a really cheap, change to add this and add that, you definitely modernized this car and made it a lot more, I guess, comfortable for your fiance to drive. But let's go ahead and hop into the backseat of this vehicle. I want to show you guys what the space is like back here. Now, the beauty about the ES being a family sedan is you do have a decent amount of space back here to basically hold adults. Now, back in the day, Lexus said there was around 35.5 inches of legroom back here, which as you can see, this is where I'd basically have the seat to drive. Headroom space is pretty good. I'm only 5'7", so I'm not the tallest, but this was pretty class competitive space. The new ES, if you guys are wondering, has about 4 more inches of legroom back in its back seat. So again, that stretched wheelbase definitely helps, but the leather back here is also still incredibly plush, which again, I love Lexus for their seats. They're known for great seats. You have an adjustable head restraint here. You have an armrest that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders as well. And you also have rear seat air vents back here, along with storage compartments. Material quality back here is also high quality, just like the front. It's soft touch everywhere with more wood trim. So again, Lexus built its reputation on doing really high-end interiors, and it still shows even when you're sitting in a car that's 20 years ago. So here we are behind the wheel of a car that is 20 years old. I have to say, when I drive so many new cars, Martin, that it is refreshing to get into something that's a lot more analog, a lot more mechanical. And this era, I think you've said before, is your favorite era of Toyota and Lexus vehicles, correct?
It is, yeah. I grew up with this. It's what I know. It's what I feel comfortable with. And you're right, it's like analog. It's a little nostalgic.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a ton of people, a lot of viewers out there who are probably watching this that also feel the same way about you with Toyota and Lexus products. It's a brand that a lot of people trust, a lot of people know, especially if you're gonna be looking for one in the used car market. And this model here doesn't feel like it has 263,000 miles on it, which is kind of crazy to see that on the odometer here. It's just really silky. This car has the ubiquitous engine, a 3.3 liter V6 hooked up with a 5-speed auto. And when you accelerate in this thing, you just barely hear the engine. It's like kind of just doing its thing in the background. It's got a slush box here that just kind of switches gears in an imperceptible manner, just so you basically can just go down the road and just forget that you're driving. It just wants you to think that you're riding around in a cloud, which, by the way, the ride quality in this thing, Martin, is just like floaty. It's
so good and floaty and comfortable. It kind of blows my mind being 20 years old with that mileage.
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting the suspension to have a lot of like creaks and rattles and groans, and I heard a couple, but honestly, not very much. There have been brand new cars that I've driven, that I've had for the week, that make a ton of noise from the suspension. I won't name brands, but it's kind of crazy to me that this Lexus with over 250,000 miles on it, it still feels really tight. It still rides really well. It has really good visibility out of the front, the side, the rear, because you have these really thin A-pillars. You can also see out of the car really nicely. It still has modern safety features like stability control, anti-lock brakes, traction control, airbags and whatnot. So that's definitely good. But also, I love the seats, Martin. These seats are like my living room furniture.
Yeah, it's like a comfortable couch.
Yeah, Lexus, for me, has always done really good seats, so it doesn't surprise me that this car does really good seats as well. But let me put my foot down here. There
There you go. V6 in action.
So again, this car is not fast. I mean, I think the magazines peg the 0 to 60 at like 8 to 8.5 seconds, which isn't fast, but I think it was enough power back in the day. I mean, you don't hurry this thing along. In fact, when you start pushing this car around corners, it's almost like Lexus engineers wanted to remind you, this is an ES, you idiot. Buy an IS if you want to drive like a jerk, like you stole the car. But I mean, I appreciate cars that are just like luxury barges now. And maybe it's because I'm getting older. I like comfortable, quiet cars now.
I'm right there with you. That's why I have my LS 460.
Yes, which I still need to drive that car with you at some point, whenever you have it all fixed up. But yeah, you can't really, fault a car like this. It is purpose built to be essentially like the equivalent of like a living room couch on wheels. It is super comfortable, super quiet, super refined. It has just enough power. I mean, yes, the new ES, or at least if you guys went to the 2007 model with its 3.5 liter V6, had a lot more power than this, and the new one has 302 horsepower. But you know what? While it is a lot of power, I actually think it might be too much power for that car.
Actually, you know what? I did have a loaner when my LS was at Lexus, and it was an ES. I believe it was just the ES 350 all-wheel drive. Yeah, because they also have
probably 250.
Maybe it was a 250. Whatever I had was really quick, surprisingly quick.
Okay.
And worlds different from this.
Yeah. So the new ES offers all-wheel drive, but only on the base 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine from a Camry, basically. Okay. That actually made 203 horsepower, I think. So it actually has less power than this.
So it must have been a 350 front-wheel drive.
Yes,
because I was like, wow, this is really quick for an ES.
Yes, and it is very quick, but it also, I noticed it kind of, I don't know why the person honked, I noticed there was kind of like a lot of wheel spin with that car. Like you put your foot down, it would torque steer, it would burn out the front tires all the time. So that's where I was like, that car begs for all-wheel drive. This thing, on the other hand, it doesn't really have that problem because it doesn't have overwhelming amounts of power, and it didn't really need all-wheel drive because of that. But I mean, overall, if you guys have never driven an ES or you've never driven a Camry, you're probably gonna get in this thing and be like wowed at how comfortable it is, because the two cars essentially drive similarly. I think Lexus probably gave it a little bit softer suspension tuning, a little bit more sound deadening materials. They also did offer an adaptive suspension on this car, if you can believe it, Martin. Adaptive variable suspension back in the day.
Yeah, on this I haven't seen that. That's pretty cool.
It's probably a super rare option. You'd be hard pressed to find an ES with all the options, because most people, let's be honest, didn't really spec it out like this. Most people just got it like this car, essentially the base car. It comes with a lot of equipment. But yeah, overall, with 263,000 miles on it, I'm impressed, Martin. This thing drives not like a new car, but it drives like a car that has half the mileage that it has, which is kind of a testament to Toyota and Lexus's reliability. It has a ton of space inside. You've added this new infotainment system, which makes it feel a lot more modern, where you can connect your phone wirelessly to it. And in terms of safety stuff, it has all the modern stuff aside from no like driver assistance stuff, which is fine because sometimes that stuff can be annoying.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, if you guys are looking at this car and you're considering it between like a Camry and an Accord, you'll be surprised to see that the ES is not that much more, and it gives you that plusher driving feel that you expect from a Lexus. So back in 2004, I would say that the best-selling Lexus at the time was probably the ES, because remember, the RX essentially came out in 1999, 2000, and it took a few years for, I guess, the sport utility craze to kind of pick up. Lexus at the time would sell over 70,000 units of these every year. It was essentially the best-selling luxury vehicle in the day. So after finally getting a chance to spend a little bit of time with this ES330, I have to say, if you guys are looking for a used car and you want something that is going to be reliable, that's going to be comfortable, and you're okay with the fact that it's not the quickest or the sportiest handling car, if you want that, Lexus will happily sell you a GS or they'll sell you an IS. There's a lot to like about the ES, and even though this car got a lot of hate from enthusiasts because it's a guzzied up Camry, I think Lexus essentially took what they did with the Camry, which, let's be honest, is already a fantastic car, and they made it even nicer. So you can essentially look at one of these as opposed to like a fully loaded Camry, and you get, again, plusher seats, you get nicer materials, you get a little bit more power, a little bit better stereo system if you guys go for the Mark Levinson audio system. And really, if you guys remember with this car, when it came out in 2004, it had an MSRP of around $31,000. Now that was for the base price. This model here, Martin doesn't have the original window sticker, but I think it has like the leather option and a couple of other small things. to maybe push the price to around $34,000. If you convert that to today's money, that's about $50-ish thousand. So if you guys look at a new ES, the new ES starts at around 42 grand. So it's actually kind of interesting that the new ES, if you convert it to today's money back then, is actually a little bit cheaper versus what this car was back in the day in 2004. Now, obviously, you're not going to be paying $32,000 for a car like this. In fact, in the used car market, I've been seeing these cars go from around $4,000 for one that has a lot of miles to around almost $10,000 for cars that have probably like under 100,000 miles. And Martin, you said how much you paid for this car?
$2,250.
$2,250 for a car with 260,000 miles. So high mileage, but incredibly, good running condition, which is really all that matters. The interior also is really well kept. The exterior, it has some minor quibbles here because, again, it has over 250,000 miles on it. But honestly, I think this car has aged extremely well. And Martin, I think you also picked up this car for an insanely good deal because $2,000 for a Lexus that's comfortable, it's plush, and you guys saw on the driving scene is still a really great car to live with on a daily basis. You really can't get better than that. So good work, Martin. Good.
Thanks.
Good find with this car. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed my quick overview on this 2004 Lexus ES330. I want to thank Martin, who is behind the camera, for doing his camera work and for also lending us this car. Martin, if people want to find your channel, where can they go?
YouTube.com/Marty Motoring. That's my channel name.
Yes, and you'll also find this car in addition to his LS460 V8 with all-wheel drive that he's also been doing a lot of work on, and he's also got an 05 Sequoia. I think Martin just really likes cars from the early 2000 era.
I think I do too. Anything Toyota and Lexus.
Yes. But anyways, guys, hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook. And as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.